violence within Kentucky's juvenile justice system, and that continues tonight after a former corrections officer is accused of rape. This is Wave News at 6. I'm John Bollmeyer, and Sari's off tonight. The former corrections officer is now at the center of an investigation, accused of having sex with teen girls at a state juvenile facility. Wave News troubleshooter Natalia Martinez has exposed the problems at the other juvenile facilities over the past year, and now she continues bringing problems to light in this exclusive.
After we reported an alleged rape at the Adair juvenile facility and teens having sex at the facility in Jefferson County, Governor Andy Beshear ordered all female detainees be moved to the detention center in Campbell County. But now, one of their former employees is under investigation. Neil Mormon, a 29-year-old former corrections officer at the Campbell County Juvenile Detention Center, is now under investigation for allegedly having sexual encounters with the teen girls he was tasked to protect. We spoke to multiple sources who told us Mormon was seen by an employee kissing an underage detainee. Other teens spoke of groping and sex acts. Wave News troubleshooters also learned staff had found love letters from Mormon in the girls' cells. Mormon has not been charged in connection to the allegations. Morgan Hall, a spokesperson for the Justice Cabinet, said the Department of Juvenile Justice learned of the allegations on May 31st and contacted Kentucky State Police the same day. Hall added they fired Mormon on June 7th and that he didn't work during the time in between. However, that timeline doesn't match what we found during this investigation. We found the allegations were reported by other employees 2 weeks before, but Mormon was still on the job. Meanwhile, top officials have blamed a lack of staffing at the Campbell County facility as the reason girls were moved and the facility was put on limited operations.
So that is why we are going to temporarily relocate the juveniles currently in the Campbell County facility to the Boyd County Juvenile Detention Center.
And here's the Cabinet Secretary, Kerry Harvey, next to the head of the Juvenile Justice Department, Vicki Reed, that same day.
We have a plan to make some changes in the immediate future that is based largely on the difficulty in staffing Campbell County.
But during both those public comments, both on June 15th, there was zero mention of Mormon or any criminal investigation that has now also gotten the attention of the feds. I just spoke to Mormon himself less than an hour ago. He was aware of the investigation, but he refused to talk about the case or even what he thought of the accusations. Morgan Hall added that when the assistant superintendent learned of the allegations on the 31st, she pulled 2 videos that, although inconclusive, raised concerns and led them to immediately contact KSP. Stay tuned. Natalia Martinez, Wave News.
Okay, we will. Thank you, Natalia.
Jail cells. I saw cells without locks. People screaming, correction officers overwhelmed, and it was a nightmare.
Councilmember Bob Holden says during his last visit to Rikers Island in September 2021, the jail was the embodiment of chaos. But on Tuesday, after touring the facility with the bipartisan Common Sense Caucus, he has a change in opinion. His colleagues agree that there have been improvements at the facility since the Adams administration took over.
This dilapidated infrastructure there that was vulnerable, they were being converted into weapons. That's not happening anymore.
For decades, activists have called for the closure of Rikers Island, citing inhumane conditions and treatment of inmates. Several inmates have died while being detained there, including 7 so far this year. A federal monitor recently released a report on how safety can be improved. The Adams administration and this caucus say the solution is to invest in the infrastructure and youth programs at Rikers instead of shutting it down.
This facility is filled with 6,200 of the most violent criminals in the city of New York. Our corrections officers are doing the very, very best that they can.
They oppose the plan to have the federal government appoint a receiver to run the facility.
which the people will pay millions of dollars for, is just an attack on our wallets and nothing more. Having somebody from Oklahoma tell New Yorkers what to do, I mean, that's just incompetence.
But Shavonna Newsom, the co-founder of Black Opportunities, says the oversight is needed to ensure the humane treatment of inmates held here to serve short sentences or while they await a decision on their pending court cases.
Why don't we want transparency? What is Rikers Island hiding that New York City residents and the whole country can't know what's going on?
When I asked the council members about the inmate deaths and what safety improvements have been made on Rikers Island, they specifically pointed to the locks. The locks have been fixed, but had no other suggestions on what else can be done to ensure inmate safety.
Rikers Island Jail Complex. The city does not appear to be making any meaningful changes there. That's according to a report filed Monday by federal monitor Steve J. Martin. He calls the city's recent efforts to improve conditions as haphazard, tepid, and insubstantial. The report cites 2 recent incidents at Rikers. In one case, a corrections officer did nothing as inmates attacked a man in their unit. In another, detainees were pepper sprayed during what was described as an unofficial hostage drill.
A little over $100 million that were received.
$12 billion is the budget for the FDNY, Sanitation Department, and Parks Department combined. And again, the mayor, city, and state leaders are calling on the federal government for more help. In the meantime, there's expected to be a city council hearing around 1 o'clock today to talk about the mayor's 60-day notice plan, asking people, families in the shelter to leave in 2 months. We are live in Midtown. Jennifer Bisram, CBS 2 News.
Jennifer, thank you. And
members say conditions have improved at Rikers. This comes after a new report by a federal monitor slammed city efforts there yet again. CBS 2's Marcia Kramer is here to explain. Marcia.
Well, Dana, the new report by the federal monitor claims the city's efforts to fix Rikers have been, and I quote, haphazard, tepid, and insubstantial, making you wonder if he's talking from planet Mars or the members of the City Council Common Sense Caucus are talking from Mars. They walked out of the Rikers Island jail complex after an extensive tour, with findings totally at odds with the federal monitor, who has issued numerous critical reports about the controversial lockup. Members of the City Council's Common Sense Caucus, led by Councilman Robert Holden, who compared this tour with his last visit in September 2021.
Complete turnaround, night and day. There's a great atmosphere in there. So for anyone, any federal monitor to say that the conditions haven't improved, they're not telling the truth. They're lying.
I was extremely impressed. The young people are a cornerstone of this environment, and to see the way in which they're being handled and the opportunities that are being put forth to them is an absolute uplifting for me and for us to see.
They're taking driver's ed. They're playing ping pong. They have video games in there. They're watching movies. They're engaged.
The council members' findings at odds with several recent reports by the federal monitor that paint a picture of total chaos, poor facilities, and dysfunction at Rikers. The new report by Monitor Steve Martin, who lives in Oklahoma, documents several upsetting episodes. A correction officer who stood by as a group of inmates assault a man in their unit. Detainees who were inexplicably pepper sprayed during an unofficial hostage drill. The Legal Aid Society, the Manhattan United States Attorney, and several other advocates want a federal judge to put Rikers in receivership, saying things have been bad for years and time is running out. Someone else needs to fix the jails. The monitor wants a city held in contempt for not fixing the jails.
The idea of outsourcing our government obligations is weak. It shouldn't be done.
The federal government may not come in and take over Rikers Island. This is us. This is the city. You have seen what the federal government has done to other things that they have come in and tried to muscle their way in. No to the federal government takeover.
I'm totally against this federal receivership.
Now, a federal court hearing on receivership will be held on Thursday. Some argue the city's been hamstrung by rules governing capital expenditures. It apparently can't spend capital dollars on projects unless they will last for 5 years, but Rikers is scheduled to close in 2027.
Marcia, thank you.
Cells. I saw cells without locks. People screaming, correction officers overwhelmed, and it was a nightmare.
Councilmember Bob Holden says during his last visit to Rikers Island in September 2021, the jail was the embodiment of chaos. But on Tuesday, after touring the facility with the bipartisan Common Sense Caucus, he has a change in opinion. His colleagues agree that there have been improvements at the facility since the Adams administration took over.
This dilapidated infrastructure there that was vulnerable, they were being converted into weapons. That's not happening anymore.
For decades, activists have called for the closure of Rikers Island, citing inhumane conditions and treatment of inmates. Several inmates have died while being detained there, including 7 so far this year. A federal monitor recently released a report on how safety can be improved. The Adams administration and this caucus say the solution is to invest in the infrastructure and youth programs at Rikers instead of shutting it down.
This facility is filled with 6,200 of the most violent criminals in the city of New York. Our corrections officers are doing the very, very best that they can.
They oppose the plan to have the federal government appoint a receiver to run the facility,
which the people will pay millions of dollars for, is just an attack on our wallets and nothing more. Having somebody from Oklahoma tell New Yorkers what to do, I mean, that's just incompetence.
But Shavonna Newsom, the co-founder of Black Opportunities, says the oversight is needed to ensure the humane treatment of inmates held here to serve short sentences or while they await a decision on their pending court cases.
Why don't we want transparency? What is Rikers Island hiding that New York City residents and the whole country can't know what's going on?
When I asked the council members about the inmate deaths and what safety improvements have been made on Rikers Island, they specifically pointed to the locks. The locks have been fixed, but had no other suggestions on what else can be done to ensure inmate safety.
For another edition of The Small Business Show with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, I'm Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of the Small Business Show, exclusively right here at ASBN.com. Businesses of all sizes are feeling the strain of today's labor shortages. As mentioned in our latest update with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, quote, if every unemployed person in the country found a job, we would still have around 4 million open jobs. And that was from the Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Today, we're discussing the labor shortage and a solution to this issue that you might not have considered yet. I know I wouldn't have considered it, but I really need to consider it, and that is hiring formerly incarcerated people. We're joined by columnist, best-selling author, keynote speaker, and a true small business expert, Mr. Gene Marks, who recently wrote a column on this very topic. So, Gene, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
And thanks so much for having me on. And you're right, it is a huge issue that's facing so many of my clients and my company as well.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Everyone's talking about it. And, one business owner said, my gosh, I could probably double my business if I could just find the people, and that's really what's holding them back. So how have you seen the labor shortage impact small businesses?
It's funny. It was really, really bad about a year ago, right coming out of the pandemic, because obviously people were still working from home. People were still getting transfer payments from the government, unemployment insurance, and that was really a big issue. It's softening up a little bit, which is good news. But every client that I have right now are looking for people, Jim. So it is which is why I wrote the piece, because there's this huge population of people that are out there that I think are underserved, and I think it's a potential resource for a lot of business owners. And I just think it's something that we need to create more awareness for.
Yeah, there's no question. Are there any industries out there that you feel have adapted successfully to the labor shortage?
Yeah, I mean, it's the industries that are able to be as flexible as possible with their employees, So services right now, when you look at like the different statistics, particularly from like the Institute of Supply Managers, they're showing how manufacturing businesses have been on the decline as far as production and purchases over the past 6 months. But the service business side has been on the upswing. And these are business services, consumer services, construction services, landscaping, things like that. They have managed to do better in finding employees and using employees better than my other groups of clients and readers. And the reason why is Flexibility. I mean, if you're running a service, but I'll give you an example. My business. So I have 10 employees. We are technology services. We do CRM systems like Salesforce and Dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But Jim, we're like totally virtual. I mean, we since 2005, if you can believe that.
Wow.
I know.
You were
Everybody
virtual
works from
when
home.
virtual wasn't cool, right?
It was like dial-up days almost, and it's funny because I always, I always make the comment that, and it's a true comment that like my overhead is low, but I do run the world's most dysfunctional company because we never see each other,
Right, right.
and everybody's out and about. But
Sure.
at the same time, I've had no problem finding people to provide services for my clients,
Yeah.
development, training, customization, because I can find them anywhere I want around the world and provide those services. If you've got feet on the ground type of business,
Yeah.
like manufacturing, construction, retail, restaurants, it's a lot more challenging.
It is. There's no question about it, for sure. But I commend you for running a successful company, and since 2005, and all virtual. You should write a book on this if you haven't already, because I'm sure there's a number of companies out there that want to say, Gene, how did you do this successfully? Because there's still some major struggles out there with it, right?
Yeah, there are. And, it's funny whenever you say successfully, yeah, we're doing great, but there's always pros and cons, and the
Sure.
grass is always greener. And, our company, I'm telling you, Jim, our company culture is awful. I mean, we don't see each other, and we're always at clients. And my whole reason for going virtual was back in 2005. I had an office in Philadelphia. Nobody would come to the office because everybody was going out to clients,
Right.
So,
Right.
but now it's like, we've tried Christmas parties and events and things like that to, whatever. And some people don't even barely know each other. So there's pros and cons to
Yeah.
running a fully virtual business, but it can be
Right.
done the right way. And
Right.
I have found, some success in doing it.
I do want to talk to you about this column that you wrote, and it's really it's amazing because the fact that we're even talking about this as a viable option, but it is, and that is hiring formerly incarcerated people to work for your company. I know it's not something that I thought about prior to reading this article, as I'm sure many people right now just said, did he just say hiring formerly incarcerated people? Oh my gosh, as they take a deep breath. But folks, you got to hear the whole story. You got to hear the whole philosophy and the theory here. So talk to us about this.
There's a number of formerly incarcerated people that have served their times. I'm not talking about mass murderers or, people that have committed really, really bad offenses.
You probably want to stay away from those that killed their former boss, right?
Probably a good idea would not be a,
that would not be a good one.
Yeah,
Right.
and by the way, although we joke around about it, I mean, the issue, one of the many issues of bringing a formerly incarcerated person into your business is you and I were talking about workplace earlier. I mean, it does have an impact on your workplace. You know, I mean, say you're working there and then you hear like, oh, Gene just hired a customer service person who just spent 5 years in prison for a drug offense. I mean, I don't know if I feel safe. I don't know if I like that.
Sure.
But there are those issues, and one of the things I point out in the column is you really need to educate your employees and make sure you're communicating with them so that they know that you're taking that road. But there is a secret sauce to doing this. If you want to hire somebody that comes from that's been formerly incarcerated, you need to work with a nonprofit company.
Mm-hmm.
Every local metropolitan area has got nonprofit organizations that are trying to get formerly incarcerated people back into society.
Right.
And you can't do it by yourself.
Right.
And what they will do is they will help you locate good candidates.
Mm-hmm.
They will help you train. They will help you interview. One guy I talked to provides transportation. So that, because again, people get out of prison and they can't afford to buy a car, or they can't, they don't know how to navigate in society. They actually provide the transportation as well. So my advice to always people saying, like, if you want to even consider hiring somebody that's formerly incarcerated, you want to do it through partnership with a local nonprofit that provides those kinds of services. And you can find them just by Googling them. But I got to tell you, I talked to a few business owners in the Philly area that have been doing this for a number of years, and they couldn't say better things. I mean, the 3 or 4 that I spoke to each said that the people that they hired that were formerly incarcerated were more loyal and better long-term employees.
They appreciated they appreciated the opportunity more.
They did. They really did. It is hard. I mean, people screw things up in their lives, and they serve their time and they serve society, and now they're trying to get their feet back on the ground again. and it's really, really hard to do. And we're looking for good talent and people that we can train and mold. And this is a population that is turning out to be an opportunity. There's also help that you can get. So the federal government has got something called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit.
Oh, wow.
So if you
Okay.
hire somebody that's formerly incarcerated, Jim, you can get up to a $9,600 tax credit,
Wow.
either on your payroll taxes or on your income taxes. So nonprofits, this is eligible for you as well. So that way, like, the government is giving you this big incentive, almost $10,000 to try and bring these people into society. And on top of that, just about every state, I mean, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, that's where I'm located. There's workforce development programs, grants that the state provides. And if you need to get training done for these potential employees, the state will give you money to get those people trained. So the governments are doing everything they can to try and incentivize us. And we need employees. It's just, to me, it just seems like kind of a no-brainer to give it a shot.
At least it's something to look into for sure, and do some more research on this for business owners that are listening to us right now. If you're looking for people, and you can't find them and they're not reporting, or coming in, I should say, for interviews, as the case is with many small business owners that I talk to, they'll run an ad, they set up the interview, and then they get a no-show. The person doesn't even show up for the interview. So, if you're looking for people to help you run your business and to work in your businesses so that you can turn a profit, this might be a viable solution, and something definitely that I think you owe it to yourself and your shareholders to at least look into.
You would be surprised at how grateful and loyal those employees are when you do give them, that chance. And we're looking for people that we can mold, that we can teach, and that will stay with us for a while, that we can retain. And if you do it the right way, you really can find a good resource of potential employees from there. Like I said, find that good local nonprofit that places the formerly incarcerated at jobs. You'd be surprised at the services that they would offer. They can really help you do it.
Yeah, with just a few minutes on Google, I'm sure for those that are watching can come up with those resources that are in their local areas, and it really is a great option. Hey, before I let you go, and I appreciate the time that you've given us today, talk to us about the overall economy and where we stand. Is now a good time to jump in and open up a business?
So, I mean, first of all, the typical response you're going to get is that it's always a good time to open up a business, and you have that list of companies, IBM and Microsoft, that they started up during a recession.
That's right.
That's all fair and good, but at the same time, you do have to be careful as to how the economy is when you do start up a business. It is a very challenging time to get capital right now for businesses. It is not catastrophic or disastrous. It's just more challenging than it was a few years ago, because interest rates right now are, the prime rates around 8.5%, which means that for existing businesses getting like loans for working capital and financing, they're paying 9, 10, 11% on that. And that is a big issue. And I think that is actually going to be a continuing issue for the next 6 months, because a capitalistic economy needs capital. And if businesses are not getting the capital they need because they're turning down loans because they're too expensive, that's an issue. If you're a startup, the availability of capital is still there, but it's just more expensive. So banks themselves are being a lot more pickier as to who they're lending money to, not because of, the economy overall, but now, it's easy to lend somebody $1 million at 2% or 3% interest, because you can do the math and see that they can, maintain those payments. But at 11 or 12% interest, it's a whole different story. So that's why a lot of banks and financing firms are pulling back.
So I think the takeaway there is you really got to do your homework to make sure that the numbers still work at that 10, 11% interest rate, and factor that in, right?
You hit it right on the head, Jim. I mean, it's return on investment. And like I said, different than it was like in 2008, 2009, where capital really dried up. Capital's out there. It's just more expensive. So you got to sharpen your pencil that much more.
Sure. And is it out there from the banks as well? I mean, do you feel that the banks have not tightened up on the lending? It's still out there.
It's, and it's funny, it goes against conventional wisdom because I would think that banks would be tightening up on lending, but actually bank lending, Biz2 Credit is a firm that has a great report every month that looks at bank lending to small business owners. And they have been reporting that they have not been seeing any kind of a significant drop off in bank lending to small business owners.
That's
And
great.
all the major banks just released earnings just a couple weeks ago, and they all said that their small business lending practice is still holding up pretty well. They're putting away reserves, but it's not that bad. The other thing to consider, if you talk about startups, Jim, is most startups usually don't get financing from a traditional bank.
That's right. Right.
So if they're getting it from other places, it's when they want to get to the next level that they might need a traditional bank to step in, and it's more challenging and more expensive now, but not catastrophic.
Yeah, for sure.
The best person in this administration finally turned around the Department of Correction. When I took office, unlike others, I did not view correction from a distance. I visited it. I was on Rikers Island probably more than any other mayor in the history of this city. And I was very clear when I picked Commissioner Molina and stated that we needed to move on a pathway to turn this system around that was dysfunctional at the highest level.
Mayor Adams, of course, opposes a takeover of Rikers, wants to see it stay under local control. But now a U.S. attorney joining the growing chorus of voices saying a federal receiver is the only way to make sure that there are changes at Rikers Island that has now seen the highest detainee death rate in a quarter of a century last year. The calls to close Rikers Island have been persistent, and today a judge could put control of Rikers in the hands of a federal receiver.
Why don't we want transparency? What is Rikers Island hiding that New York City residents and the whole country can't know what's going on?
A federal monitor already asking the judge to hold Mayor Adams' administration in contempt for failing to improve conditions on Rikers. But a bipartisan group of city council members touring the facility on Tuesday noting improvements.
This dilapidated infrastructure there that was vulnerable, they were being converted into weapons. That's not happening anymore.
The people will pay millions of dollars for is just an attack on our wallets and nothing more. Having somebody from Oklahoma tell New Yorkers what to do, I mean, that's just incompetence.
So far this year, 7 inmates have died at the facility. Serious stabbings and slashings, though, have decreased from their pandemic high. But the number of inmates suffering with mental illness has doubled in that same time period to now 1 in 5. Now, that judge also ordering for the first time the New York City Department of Corrections Commissioner to attend today's hearing as well. That's starting at 2 p.m. We're live outside of City Hall. I'm Kirsten Cole, Pix 11 News. Dan and Hazel to you.
Certainly a high.